Where's your camera? Oh, okay. Demonstration. You need one? I didn't have a street. Oh, not a good thing to delay. Let's get started.
Yep.
Well, good afternoon or good morning. It's afternoon in Hawaii, so aloha from Hawaii. It's actually 2:15 yesterday, right now. I'll apologize for having to speak behind the tree, so I'll try and do that. And I also apologize for starting late. Our GPS wasn't set properly, and we were a few meters up the way, standing there wondering where everyone was, and there's nobody here to listen to us, so it becomes a bit worrisome. But again, just welcome all of you folks, and it's always terrific to come back to Australia and to be able to be part of your great event that you have here and see all the enthusiasm. We talk about it. This will keep us alive and happy for another year until we get back here next year. It's just the sport's just grown tremendously, and we see it, and we know that there are different people, different disciplines doing different things, but there's some certain things that are just consistent that just our humble perspective, we just want to share our perspective. And I've been paddling since I'm 56 years old. I've been paddling since I was 8. Never missed a summer. I started doing marathon racing when I was 13. You know, we did a number of those things. I've done 37 Molokai channels. I've raced all over the world, and I've done a number of different things. I coach a canoe club back in Hawaii, a very successful club. We've got about 350 members, Kailua Canoe Club. And we're in the middle of our sprint season right now. And so I'll be sharing today. What I'd like to do during our brief time with you is just share some coaching tips, talk a bit about steering, talk about some paddling techniques, and try and make it to be very free-flowing. It's difficult to talk about one and not have it flow into the other. So the reason why I have Steve Cole here, Steve Cole's one of our more accomplished paddlers in Hawaii over the years. Steve's won the Molokai Channel and OC1. He's done it all, you know. So he and I grew up together as kids in Kailua, and then he was about this tall, and then he left and went to Kauai and came back this big, you know. So
He coached me when I was 12.
yeah.
He taught me how to steer.
So it's just a good time to be here with you. So just maybe from some coaching coaching points for us. I mean, you want to start? A couple of things that I'd like to first talk about is equipment. You know, you've got to have equipment that, from a coaching standpoint, you've got to have equipment that is ready to be used and it's safe. You know, I just was standing there in the wrong place, observing the women going out, and I noticed that there was a canoe that the ladies are racing today that the yakus are backwards. And if there's any type of swell action around South Head, they're going to really be in for a rude awakening. The Yama's like this, and it's going out there, and they didn't have a chance to bring them back in. But again, making sure that you've got good equipment, you've got the basic knowledge as to how to rig it properly, and I think it's important for you to spend a lot of time with your members, no matter how few or how many, that you go through some basic things with respect to canoe rigging, canoe maintenance, you know, basic things were how to set your yakus up, how to tie it. I know we're using a lot of straps nowadays with it, but I think it's important to not lose sight on how to tie. They've got bolts that they're using now. And some of the canoes, you really got to check that, because what happens with many of them, and I'm not speaking for the boats here yet, but many of the one-man canoes, when they were developing them and they started going to the bolt piece, when you got on heavy tension, just the stress on it works the bolt backwards and pops out. You know, so even with these new boats that are being built up here, I'd mentioned that to Travis the other day, we've got to really check to see that that's safe. So I know some of you have taped it in on that, but from a coaching standpoint, making sure your equipment's right. Looking at canoe paddles, what I'd suggest, I know if paddles can tend to be expensive, but try and get people using the same type of paddle. Right? It's difficult when you've got the different paddle makers that are out there, and they're all good at what they do. Marty Schrecker has a good blade that he builds up here. Dave Chun has his blades that are going with a Kealoha. Les has his blades. Les Look has his blades, Makana Lee paddles that they're all building. But they're all good paddles. And there are others out there that are doing making paddles for you to use, but I just suggest that you all get your teams to use the same type of paddle, right? Because when you start talking about paddling technique as we get into that, it's much better reference point if you're using the same tool you paddle with, if it's going to be a bent shaft, and it's all preference. Because I think with a paddling stroke, as we'll get into it, doesn't matter what paddle you have, you still have to do certain things, basic things that you have to do with a stroke. But one thing that I try and minimize is just the tool that you're using. So you can emphasize the same type of technique. And I think that's one of the first things, and making sure that's the right size. You can size them up. Steve can talk to that. The other part is on your steering blades. For your steers, I have about 6 steering blades, 7 actually, all for different conditions. Some for real rough ocean, like my blades. When I do the Molokai channel, I tend to have a longer shaft. As I was mentioning to the gentleman here, I actually build the for Molokai, I have the shaft built a bit different. I put more strength through the middle, through here, to absorb tension, and my shaft through here is thicker. But I actually add a few inches to it, because in the channel, you need to make a quick correction. You get the paddles down deep. For sprint racing, I use a shorter paddle with a bigger blade. Right, so it's just that type of thing. But usually in Molokai, for example, in the race that I'll steer this weekend, I have extra paddles on the support boat, but I keep my extra paddles right on the floor during a race. I have my own paddle there, 2 of them actually. 3 Molokais ago, it was a course that was just pushing south, pretty heavy, and so you had to try and pull your boat back. I snapped 2 paddles in that race, but I had a third, and then I had others on the boat. So you always make sure your equipment's sound. Same thing with your paddles in your canoes. Like out here in the race this weekend, you make sure your boat's equipped with your extra blades there. You don't have time to be going back to the support boat for an extra paddle. Just that. See if you had anything from a equipment standpoint. No. And then in your distance races, obviously, you want to try and get a support boat driver that knows what he or she's doing. And it's best to take them out on practice runs. And then it's good to be able to coach your paddlers too, about how to get in the water and how to set up and that type of thing. So just and from a coaching standpoint, don't use the example that I used today and show up late. Right? Not good. You set a schedule, you set a time frame, you let them know what you'd be doing during that time, and then you stick to it. Promptness is very important from a coaching standpoint, because that's where the discipline starts, and then you can work from there. From a coaching standpoint. So I coach all of our Masters Women and Masters Men's programs at Kailua now. So on a given day for the Masters Women, I might have 7 crews in the water, but everybody knows you've got to be there at a certain time. You get there in a certain time, and they just expect you to be there, and we get out in a certain time. So it's just that promptness and the discipline, and it's just showing a great deal of respect to your crews. No one in the crew is that important that you've got to wait around for them. And as ours know, you just don't wait. Doesn't matter who you are, we're going. And you learn that a crew's only as strong as the team. You do not need one individual. I'll just the crews that I coach now hasn't lost a flat water race on Oahu for 6 years. And there were individuals that basically were not considered to be good paddlers. One thing I noticed about them when I went to coach and get involved with them, they were very disciplined, and they were willing to train, and they were willing to learn. And subsequently, now 6 years have passed. It seems like it was just yesterday. And then it's not surprising that you have other paddling folks trying to come and jump into the crew. But again, that's just because you've got discipline, you've got people, and you've got the resolve within yourself to go ahead and tell the great paddler that they're not so great. Right, and it's all part of coaching, and I think that's a difficult thing to do for some, but I think in the long run you learn that that's what has to happen if you expect to build a very strong team. And anything you want to add?
Yeah, with picking a crew, it's kind of a hard one, because you got a lot of people get like, maybe with even you guys know about like dialing a crew. Right, so then you got to pick your crew from within your club, and then you guys, like Komoa was saying, you got guys that are coming in. So you got to find that fine balance of somebody that might be out of the club that's going to be stronger than the guys that are in the club that you've been coaching for 6 years or so, and then all of a sudden you got these guys that are coming in. So there's a real fine balance. You want to keep on growing the club, which Kamo's done a really good job of, and that's I've coached a club over in Kauai, and a big part of it is like I have a smaller club, so we actually have to draw in people sometimes to, and you know what I mean, right? It's a lot of you guys have to do that, and so there's like the building the club is so important to winning that race that you're going for at that one time. So if you can grow the guys that you're working with instead of like trying to pull in people and cutting people out of the crew. That's just, it's a really important part of it for sure. Yeah.
I think the other thing too, from a coaching standpoint, is just to build consensus on objectives. What is the objective of your team? In Hawaii we have soccer, a lot of soccer, not as good as the you folks in the European countries, but we're getting there. But we have two leagues basically for our children. One is the ASO League and the other is the HISA League. And I know when I coach with our folks, I'm not against either, but I want to be part of the HISA League. We're not there just to participate. You want to win, or you want to put your best effort forward all the time. And it's important to get that agreed upon. And I'll tell our folks the first day you come out here, we're out here to win. And winning is winning. You win in practice. You'll never do anything in the races that you haven't prepared for in practice. And so you can understand that our practices are just insane. Just to do a race that's 3 minutes, our sprint races. We'll practice hours. Our short practice now we'll do an hour and a half, but it's just intense. On weekends, right now, this time of the year, we'll do a 2.5 hour practice. A lot of 15-minute pieces on OC1s. Every Sunday, never fails. 8 o'clock in the morning, you're there. If you're not there, you're not racing. And then what we do during the off season, and I know it's a bit difficult here because the weather's a bit different, but what we've done is you sense commitment that way, and that during the off season we're expected to show up at least once a week. And what happens, and the week when we train, it's about 2 hours, and it's intense enough to help you realize that if you want to be part of the crew, you'll keep yourself in shape. Understanding that we've all got to do other things, and we all have jobs, several jobs as we go through. So from a coaching standpoint, setting the expectation, like Steve was saying. We'll have people that'll come over to the club that want to paddle. But if you show up on June 1st, which is the beginning of, or actually April 1st, which is the beginning part of our training season, you're too late. And I'll just tell them that. I've had terrific paddlers come over just for distance and line up, and they're much faster on the OC1 than everyone that I've had. And they'll come in and they'll pull me aside and say, okay, come on, where am I? And I just tell them, count the people. And I am not being arrogant or anything. I said, count all these guys over here. And that day that this one individual came, we had 13 others out there. I said, what number are you? 14. You're 14. I said, do you want to be a part of the team? Come here and train during the off season. I said, the reason why you're coming here is because of everything that they've accomplished up until time. And what I found is it's just kept the crew honest, kept them disciplined. I don't have to worry about them training during the off season. And we've been able to attract excellent paddlers. And it's not necessarily, I'm not looking for the best paddler per se. It's somebody that has attitude, the right attitude, somebody that's humble, somebody that's willing to work, someone that's willing to take constructive criticism, and to put up with my nastiness. I'm a nice guy, but I'm a stickler for detail. Because I think when things start falling apart, it's because of that. Because of the lack of discipline and the lack of attention to detail. And to recognize that each one of our individual actions impacts the entire crew. So if I decide not to reach on a stroke, that's not good. Because it makes the other 5 in the boat, their effort, useless. You've countered that. So you've got to always think. Go through a checklist that we'll run through during our coaching pieces, but during some technique pieces as we go through. So,
any questions about? I just want to give you a sense of.
I just want to give you a sense of some of the coaching, just philosophies that we have. But our objective is to. I'll give you an idea. For me, I have 3 goals with respect to paddling. We have this open ocean steersman race up in Waikiki. It's a sprint race. And with that, because of my experience, I can steer as many races as I possibly can. So they have like 38 events. And I think the most I've been able to steer is about 15 or 16 of them. But it ranges everywhere from a quarter mile on up to a mile and a half. And it's just a rush. But I trained for that race. I trained for Hamilton. And I trained for Molokai. Everything else is ancillary. Because when you train for those races, you've got to get in excellent shape and you've got to just be on it. And so you set objectives. And with our crew, it's the same thing. We train for Molokai. So we do our races. Like I mentioned earlier, we'll train for 2.5 hours to race 4 minutes. But what we've got to do is fill the void because the body gets a little nervous. So we started training on Saturdays before our sprint races and that type of thing. But again, coaching again just starts with all of you. And you're here and you're willing to listen and learn. And there isn't a moment that goes by that I don't learn. I come here often. I just observe different things that are going on. Chris Maynard and I have been racing against each other for a long time. A lot of your ocean folks have come to Hawaii. Hayden Kinney brought Grant there when he was a youngster, and he did our Molokai channel. Right after that, that's how our ski season started, because Hayden allowed us to build surf skis, and that's where a lot of our surf ski and then the OC1s took off after that. And so we had all participated in that. We did some K1 training for the Olympic teams and things like that. None of us here made it, but we went to nationals and got a few medals here and there. But the big thing was that we met coaches that had proper training techniques that we've been able to employ and implement with respect to paddling. So again, always looking outside your area for ways to improve, and you look outside your sport. We don't use our OC6 training. I don't use that for conditioning at all. It's all technique training. When I get in there, it's just for technique. Sometimes I have them paddle. We've got different levels of paddling. Level 1 is just put your paddle in the water. We'll do a lot of that. Teach people how to paddle slow so that they can go fast. All of our condition training is done outside the 6-man. And I just find it very easy. We'll stagger it, even with my women and with the men. I'll put them in one-man canoes. They hate it. I know they do, because it just shows all your weaknesses quickly. If you're not paddling properly, technique-wise, the boat will not move. So a lot of great paddlers have been humbled on a one-man canoe, right? Because they learn that they need to improve like everyone else, and it's helped. So again, that's just my basic coaching that goes on with us now over in Hawaii, and I think it's consistent with what you see.
How many hours a week do you spend in the canoe?
Oh my! If you ask my wife, too many. Okay, generally, from a coaching standpoint, an hour a week. From the training standpoint for our team, every Monday we meet and we do sprints, or OC1. So we're about an hour and a half on Monday. But it's a combination. I do a 24-minute piece that takes them around a series of islands. So I want them to be able to paddle upwind, sidewind, sense the surf, and then I do a lot of uphill racing for resistance. Anybody can go downhill. So you do a lot of uphill resistance training. So on Mondays we do that. Some days I'll just do ladders. It could be anywhere from 15 seconds on up to 2 minutes. Or some days I'll do a 1 minute, 2 minute, 3 minute, 4 minute, 5 minutes, and then drop it back down. Depends on the time of year. But Monday is pretty intense. And I may be contradicting myself, but they know that we're going to be out there that long, but I never tell them what the workout's going to be. Even during the sprints, I won't tell them what we're going to do. Sometimes I switch them around because we're human beings. You don't want anybody in there sandbagging. And I'll call them on it. I'll call them on it if we're doing a sprint and one person's way in the back. I mean, so far behind on one, and then 2 sprints later, they're way ahead. I'll just call them on it. Because it's just not progressing. So on Mondays, we do that an hour and a half. Our second day during the week, it's usually Thursday. Thursday we'll go in a 6-man, that's another hour and a half. Friday we'll be in a 6-man, it'll be another hour and a half. And then on Sunday, right now, this time of year, 2.5 hours. But that's our routine during the season. We have a number of people that do the circuit, but the reason why I share that with you, with the folks that I've been able to coach, and just a special group of people, they're here with me. The biggest challenge I have is getting them not to train. Because on the off days, they'll be in the water. And so you've got to tell them to control themselves, because it can have an impact on the crew. So again, but the good thing about that too is if you've got that sense, that commitment, then you tailor your practices to that. You tailor your practices to it. And if somebody within the team, they're training like that, and they come up to you and tell you, what, feeling a bit tired, they're probably characteristic of what's going on with the other teammates, and you just back off on your training. But I set a goal so that by the time we get to Molokai, 2 weeks before Molokai, our guys will do a 4.5-hour run, all on one-mans. And it's just a series of 20-minute pieces. And the first 2.5 hours is all uphill. Everything's uphill, just pushing. And then the last part of it is downhill. But by that time, then that's our long training run. But even from the beginning of the year, what I'll do is I'll start off with I started off with 10-minute pieces, and we're in rough ocean. I take them out there so that they can sense the currents and the tide, and because it's the same thing in a canoe. I want them to be able to feel it, so the steersman's not having to tell you. And so we'll start off with 10-minute pieces. We're doing 12-minute pieces now. When we get back home, every month I increase it by 2 minutes, and we'll do a series of these pieces on the water. But we're trying. It's more the amount of time. We'll get up to 3 hours, and so that by Molokai time we'll be up to speed. But just a general idea. So much time we spend. I'm trying to get our women there. We got an excellent bunch of women out there paddling. Now a lot of experience. Just trying to get them to recognize the use and the utilization of a one-man canoe and how it'll actually improve their paddling. They've all won Molokai races and everything, but it's just you can't. I always tell our group, history's for reading. What you did yesterday, it's not going to help you tomorrow if you're not going to apply the same principles and work ethic.
One of the things too, like when you're starting, like if anybody you're coaching or you're working with coaches and stuff like that, is one of the things you want to try to do is in the beginning of the season you want to build that strength, or even off season is even a better way to do it. Where your off season you're building that strength, you're doing cross training, maybe with weights or resistance training, and then when you get into your sport that season, then you can be ready to work on technique and then building the endurance. And then when you get closer to the race, so try to set a goal, what race you're really working for, because there's so many different races that you're doing throughout the season, right? But if you can set yourself on a goal to watch race individually, maybe even for yourself too, if you're paddling one man, whatever it may be, and then you can actually plan your whole thing, work backwards from there, and build your strength, build your endurance, and then just before you race, you're building that fast twitch, that fast muscle, and then you actually break it down and you bring your workouts down, kind of in a resting period for getting ready for the race, and then you're ready to go. So you really what it is a kind of like if you guys know about periodization, it's like a whole thing of getting your muscles ready for it, building that strength, building the fast twitch, fast muscles, and then going for it, and then resting and getting ready for the race. So through like the whole thing that he's saying, all that time period in each day, and a lot of it is individual. If you want to excel what you're doing in the sport with 6 guys, like you're sitting, like Komo was saying, in the one man, it's going to show, right? So if you're working out individually and you're going for it, then now you're going to make the crew so much better, and you're going to make that crew.
Yeah. How many of you use one man? Go ahead.
Just like a normal average sort of club, how do you get on when you've got very few OC1s in your club? Like if your members aren't that way, how do you substitute that? I mean, you can throw a carrot out there and say you've got to buy it last, but what do you do to get them up to speed to start with?
Just get them interested in paddling a 6-man canoe. I just rotate through. But just get them interested in the 6-man canoe. Everything that we're talking about, you can do in a 6-man canoe. You can do it in a 6-man canoe, so don't lose that point. It's a good point to be made. You can use it because even with our club, it's large now. We've got 20 canoes, 2 coil canoes. We've got a 3-man and everything, but we all started off with 1 canoe. We had 1 canoe, and everything else we did was on the beach. We did our paddling technique training in the sand. Just to tell you how we started. We swam laps in the bay. We got all the conditioning done. I did a lot of our technique work when I was a child in the sand. Our coach just gave us 6 sticks on the beach, and we sat there, and it was intentional that might be getting into some technique things. But he talked about the catch and everything, but in the sand and making sure that our line was straight. And we paddle in the sand for hours. Just to... Oh, easily. Yeah.
They have clinics too. You can set up for different clinics like that.
I'll give you some correspondence that I can give it to Colin, and he can get it over to you folks. I definitely welcome you over. We've got a ton of canoes. I think we live in one of the most beautiful beaches in the world, and I definitely share that with you. Paddling's allowed me to travel all over the world. It's helped me in my business work that I do. I actually manage a wealth management group for a large bank. In a way, I've been there for 30 years. I manage the largest a trust that was set aside by Hawaii's last princess. It's a $9 billion entity that it's Hawaiian-based to try and make sure that the Hawaiians there were educated, but we do much more than that. We support 17 charter schools. Our budget's about $300 million, but we take care of a lot of the public. We do curriculums, educational curriculums and things, but within that, the reason why I share that with you is the bank that I'm with sponsors a high school training program, high school season, for all those students that aren't involved in American football or soccer or basketball, those types of things, softball. We have a canoe season for them. We do that, and then we have another club season right after that. So we try to get our kids involved and give them a sport. So, yeah, I would definitely, you give me a ring and I'll make time for that and get you exposed to some of our things that we do there.
That's really, that's a real important thing. It's like I was talking to Benny, the announcer, and he was saying, that the whole sport in Australia, even in Hawaii, it starts dropping down with our kids program. But if you really think about it, I mean, the kids are the whole what's going to bring it, keep it going. So if you can try to get the kids involved and grab a couple kids that are involved in it, and then those kids grab the other kids in the school programs and get it really going, because Hamilton Islands is more of an adult race really, but really you got to really get that program going with the kids. That's why it's so great that with Komoa, with the foundations that he works for, that's helping out the kids programs and things like that. And if you can get that going in Australia, you got to really think about it, because we've seen it over the years. There's a lot of adults that paddle, and we really got to get the kids program going for sure.
But I think to your point about the canoe, if you don't have one man, get people interested in the canoe. A lot of the things that I'm talking about, you can do that. And you've got to throw in a bit of fun too every so often. One thing that's extremely important for everyone is, the steer in a boat never gets complimented when they do well. But if something goes wrong, it's the steer. So it's good to have feet to humble the folks and rotate a bit. Rotate people through in different seats and help them understand the importance of everyone. Because every seat is different, and I'll talk through some of that progression as we go forward. Any questions on coaching? Maybe you can give us some insight on what you do here. Is it much different than what you've been focusing in on? No, anyone? No? Any questions? Anybody? You don't? Yeah.
Just because of the you don't have a one man.
We probably train 4 times a week, but it's all in the sixes, and then the one man sort of outside of that. Not sort of that specific one man training.
Yeah, we've gone the opposite, because I've used the one man actually the correct technique. Because the one man will really, maybe we can get into that a bit. The reason why I really emphasize the one man is just I'm able to get there, and maybe we can talk through a basic paddling stroke. When do you go do that? Yeah. Yeah.
You do this on flat water generally?
Pardon me?
You do the technique work on flat water?
On flat water.
Yeah.
And then I'll talk to them about how to paddle in the ocean a little better.
Time trials?
For my team that's been racing, these past 6 years, I've never done a time. Never timed. The women I coach, I've never timed.
Compare the two against each other, the two one-mans against each other?
I just watch how they paddle. I watch how the people paddle, how they perform in the water, and I put them in the boat. I get their technique down. I've never timed. And my women have been winning their races for years now, and the men have been winning.
And I do it the opposite. I time everything.
You can justify your existence.
No, actually, I did. Well, for 2 years, actually, I did that just to try it out. I was doing it like Komoa was doing, and then I said, you know what? I'm going to try it out. I'm going to try to test everybody with time trials on the one man, time trials on a pool with only one person in the canoe pulling and one steersman, and then also with switching them out with 6 guys, 6 girls in the canoe, and then we switch them out that way, and I figured it out. But it was still hard, because one person will do really well in the one man, but poorly in the 6 man, and then vice versa. So you got to take the balance all the way around for sure.
It's another tool. And they told my women I'm going to start timing, which caused a great deal of anxiety. Yeah, what day are you going to do this? What are you going to do it on? So even like with the, if I were to time somebody on our let's say our 1,000-meter course, I'll do it without a turn. I'll have them just do 1,000 meters straight, because the steer can affect the time. And so that's why you've really got to keep it balanced. I've found that if I've got the right people in the that have been training well on the OC1, and I've got their technique proper, it tends to match up with the times. If I do run a time, and I'm clocking them all the time. I'm just not telling them that I'm clocking them. So I can tell who's doing what. And I can tell by people how they paddle and what their bodies look like as you learn a lot they're using an OC1. When somebody's in an OC1 and you're having them compete against one another, their bodies look different if they're putting pressure on and they're applying themselves. So you can pick that out in a canoe like this. You can pick out when someone's slacking, when they've taken that 1 or 2 strokes off. And I'll call them on it, Come on, And then what happens to, when you're in a canoe, in the OC1, I can go ahead and work technique like I'd like to say. So let me, maybe you can. I think just a couple of things. With respect to a paddling stroke,
that I'd just like to emphasize.
Yeah. You know, one thing that I always talk about with
Now we can hear you.
oh, now I've got to shut up. Oh, we're just talking about the paddling technique. Come over here.
We got caught up with the canoe bringing it around.
Oh yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
Barge was there and we couldn't get out, so we got
I
stuck.
saw that canoe. Come on over here. Just went through some paddling technique and everything I do now, Chris is going to critique me. So.
Oh no.
Just some basic things with respect to a paddling stroke. I mean, when you sit there, you know, what I try and emphasize is, for example, if I'm standing here, what people tend not to use in the early years of paddling, they don't use these muscles from here, your trunk, when you're paddling. So if I try and emphasize, you can see it this way. This is the side of a canoe, right? What you want to try and do is always have your paddle here. Here's the side of the boat. You don't want to have any space between the paddle and the canoe. Right? Because if you jump on an OC1 and you try and paddle that way, which way does your boat go? So why should it be any different in the 6-bay? So you always want to try and get your paddle here. And if you look at all the different studies that were done on C1 paddlers and things, it's just pretty uniform what's going to make a boat move. So basically, the paddle has to be here, but how are you going to get it there? Right? Where is it going to be positioned? You look at your bottom arm. Your bottom arm's got to be straight, right? But you've got to make sure that you've got it locked out properly. But you see where my top hand is? It's not in here. It's here alongside the canoe. I'm right here, right? Because ideally what you want to do is you want to get that paddle down, place it quietly. When you place it quietly in the water, you basically make the water hard. The water becomes hard. When you place it, the water becomes hard, and basically what you're trying to do is place your paddle and you want to pull yourself up to that spot, right? That's what you're doing all the time. That's a basic stroke. Okay, but you got to get it in quiet, you got to drive it. What is this top arm doing here? I got my top arm over here. What is this doing? This is just driving down. What people make the mistake of is they're trying to put the paddle and pull it back. You don't need to do that. You come here, you place it, and you drive. It'll pull you forward anyway. The paddle will come back. Ideally, too, the minute your paddle gets to, from this angle, bottom end in front of the top, to like this, you're inefficient. You know, yesterday when I watched some of the one-man races, you can see where the change occurred. I might be getting myself in trouble, but I'm going to critique it anyway. You know, when I watched the finish of the 16K race, the two guys, and you can see it on the video. And you watch Big Todd, he's so strong. And I know they're training partners and everything, but if you look at the difference between the individual who won and Todd, the individual who won, when he was finishing, he was here, big reach. Todd was much larger, but Todd was like this. Doing this one. Right, so he gave up about a foot. Much more efficient. And you know, I'll always tell people that when you're paddling, reach is your friend. You get tired, you reach. Right? But what are you doing with the rest of your body after you've got this situated up? And the reason why I was standing here doing this is often people will reach this way, but try and get reaching back. Right? Watch what I do with my hip. I just move my hip forward. This is how I get my reach. I'm just rotating the hip forward. It's very similar like when you're paddling skis and different things, right? But it's a discipline to do that. So here, I've got my paddle situated here. I'm going to reach, I just move my hip. See how much more distance I get. Move my hip, place the paddle, back through. Right, you get about to here, your knee. The minute your paddle, you start losing that perpendicular part of it, you got to think about getting it out. Okay, and what you're doing with the top arm, where is it relative to your shoulder? It's not down here. When you get down here, it'll come back. So you've got a guide, you finish it, you're right in here, you break it, break this in, break the arm off, and right back up. So you see a lot of people doing this. They're trying to do this. Not efficient. You go through.
Yeah.
Chris is,
No, exactly.
Trevor's injured, so he can't. You know.
Exactly what Kamala said is that front part of the stroke is just so important, that initial catch, and a lot of the paddlers tend to, as we get here, even in 6-man, use your top arm before your paddle enters the water. So what you'll find, everyone's hardly reaching out, and then they go to find the water or to prize the water, and it's like this. You use your top arm before you lock in. So it's just a matter of, like Kamala said, surprise the water. Okay? Quietly just drop it down. So you just drop your shoulder down to find the water first, and it's just wham, boom, and just lock in. okay? Not so much out here, and then we all tend to use our top arm, and then we lose about 12 inches there. And that's what Aaron was doing yesterday. Tom was a bit tired, trying to catch him, but he was reaching out, locking in, bang, okay? The front here, yeah, it's like,
It feels like you're cheating.
yeah,
Because the normal tendency is you want to just bang it. What you're doing is you're coming here and you're just placing it. Just placing it and driving it.
So we always talk about just dropping the shoulder.
Drop
so
the
we
shoulder.
Get to here, just boom, then bang, locking. So it's not so much everyone's racing. And the other thing is everyone tends to hold the paddle really tight. So again, that has a lot to do with the flow of the canoe, the recovery of the stroke. So when you come out, everyone's got the paddle gripped tightly, and you get to here, and your hand's still holding the paddle tight, and you've got no release. So you really just want to relax that bottom hand, so the blade just sits in there, and you can actually paddle with 2 fingers or 1 finger in training. You just get the feel where your hand is nice and loose, and it's just lock in, drive off your legs. Like Noah said, you're actually bringing the canoe forward on the paddle, so it's like a lever, it's just like boom. So you're actually not physically trying to pull the boat, okay?
It's almost like you want to think about, like, say if you're paddling along and you had your canoe or your paddle was a pipe in the water, and you're grabbing that pipe in the water and you're pulling yourself to, and it's locked in the water.
Grabbing the next
Yeah,
part.
that's the feeling you want to get in your gut. That's the feeling right down in your chi that you want to feel that you're grabbing it and you're not just slicing to the water. You're actually pulling the canoe and that thing's locked in the water. Like
If you just envisioned a series of poles that were placed in alternate positions, you're just grabbing it, sticking it there, you're pulling yourself forward.
Yeah.
You're grabbing the other, you're pulling yourself forward. That's all you're doing. But you've got to plant it and you've got to get the proper mechanics in. You know, we just did that Aono race a few weeks back, and when I got in, I went home and I just said my feet are sore. But it's just from moving. The rest of my body was fine. My feet were sore, my legs were sore, you know. But it's
we
just
all tend to think it's an upper body sport, but we've got to really work on our legs.
Yeah.
When you finish these races, you should have sore legs, so you're driving off your heels, and you've got to constantly remind yourself about using your legs, because you just tend to focus on paddling. And you go, right, I've got to think about my legs. And just once you start thinking about driving off the bottom of your heels, then the rotation will come as well. You can just feel your legs starting to pump.
It's a bit of a dumb question, but the thing that I find